Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome once again to another edition of B&B Hockey Talk. I'm Aaron Bloxel with my co-host, Mr. Matt Balzer. Matt, let's jump right into it. NHL poll questions to the players. Just recently had some interesting and not so interesting results. Why don't you go through some of those with us, as obviously Connor McDavid dominated some of those categories.
Yeah. So there'll be a lot of percentages thrown at you, but I'll try to do it as fast and quickly and clearly as possible.
Why don't you leave the percentages out and just talk about the players? Let's just do that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So best forward, Connor McDavid, well above Sidney Crosby in the player voting. Best defenseman, Victor Hedman, and Drew Doughty was number 2. Roman Josi was number 5 on the list, which I like. Best goalie, Carey Price. Number 2 was Pekka Rinne, which I found interesting just because he struggled a little bit this year, but he just beat out Andrei Vasilevsky in the 3rd spot. Best shot, of course, Alexander Ovechkin, followed by Shea Weber, Patrick Laine, Austin Matthews, and Steven Stamkos were the other guys on the list. Underrated player, Alexander Barkov was number 1. Nicholas Backstrom, number 2. And then we had Braden Point, number 3. Evgeny Kuznetsov and Mikko Rantanen tied for the last spot. Difficult player to play against. Of course, this is Connor McDavid at the top, followed by Crosby, Bergeron, McKinnon, and Kopitar.
Bergeron, top 3. Interesting.
Yeah, and it gets even more interesting with some of those players. If you wanted to start your franchise with one player, McDavid, number 1, Crosby, number 2, Austin Matthews, number 3, Patrice Bergeron, number 4, and Austin Matthews. Nathan McKinnon, number 5. Best trash talker, Brad Marchand, followed by Drew Doughty, Ryan Reeves, Claude Giroux, and Nick Cousins from the Arizona Coyotes, which I found interesting. And the worst trash talker, well, that was also voted for Brad Marchand. It was also the worst trash talker, followed by the only Canuck on any of these lists. Antoine Roussel was number 2. PK Subban, Nick Cousins, who was also on the worst list, and Brendan Lemieux are apparently the worst trash talkers in the league. The one that I found that I liked that they did was best female player going on right now. Number 1 was Hillary Knight. Number 2, Marie-Philippe Poulin. And then followed by Amanda Kessel, Kendall Coyne-Sheffield, and Emily Falzer. I'll go with pronunciation on that one. Best arena atmosphere, Las Vegas by far was leading, followed by Montreal, Nashville, Chicago, and then Winnipeg. Best mascot, we all know who's going to win this. It's Gritty, of course. and then 2 fun ones. Best dressed player, Henrik Lundqvist was number 1, followed by PK Subban, Erik Karlsson, Brent Burns, and Tyler Seguin. And best hair, Erik Karlsson at number 1, Henrik Lundqvist at number 2, who should have been number 1, and then William Karlsson, number 3, Brent Burns, number 4, and William Nylander, number 5.
Where's the flow on that list? Come on.
I know the flow. Luckily, Connor McDavid and his terrible hairdo to start the season, luckily did not make the list. But yeah, lots of names being thrown out there. But yeah, heavily McDavid just running away with all the big awards. But yeah, I think some of the surprising ones, like best goalie, I thought Vasilevsky would have been a lot higher on the list. But, of course, Carey Price, he just picked up his 5th 30th win season of his career over his last game against Philadelphia. But, yeah, just lots of names.
You and I somehow overlooked putting Carey Price in our top 10 at the beginning of the year, which
if you go by –
we both thought if Montreal played better, he'd definitely be in the top 10 again. But why don't you lots to talk about as far as injuries and players returning as we continue down the stretch to the playoffs here since our last show on Monday. Why don't you update us with the latest on those?
Yeah, so we had the Tampa Bay Lightning. They clinched the President's Trophy as a top team in the NHL. They have like 21 more points, something like that, than the Boston. It's either Boston or Calgary this season. What I also saw is that they have a power play that's going at 28.4%, which would actually tie, I think, right now for the best power play percentage in a single season with the Calgary Flames of the late 80s. And also, Braden Point and Steven Stamkos are 1 and 2 in power play scoring or for power play goals this year. They'd be the first two players from the same team to be 1 and 2 in power play goals since Marcus Naslund and Todd Bertuzzi in 2002-03 were 1 and 2. So that's my one Canucks stat there that I had to get in. But also the San Jose Sharks clinched a playoff spot after the Minnesota Wild lost to the Colorado Avalanche, as those bottom four teams in Arizona, Dallas, Colorado, Minnesota are all fighting for those last two playoff spots.
And if the Canucks win tonight, they'll be 4 points out.
I know, yeah, which they probably won't happen. And with Anders Nielsen getting his return to Vancouver, he'll probably get a shutout or something.
A shutout for sure for Nielsen tonight.
Yeah. And then getting to injuries, lots of guys returning. Chris Letang returned last night. He scored a goal, even though they lost to Carolina, which is another great celebration with the duck hunting. With the
I loved it. I know some fans hated it. I thought it was hilarious.
I got such a great kick, and they're only 2 points back at Pittsburgh now for third place, with 2 games in hand on Pittsburgh. Wow. So keep an eye on the Hurricanes there. David Pastrnak made his return to the lineup. I saw the way he injured his thumb. He was actually just walking to his car, and he just tripped, and he put all his weight on his one hand, and he had to get surgery on his thumb after, just the way that he fell. Sort of crazy there. Vladimir Tarasenko also returned to the lineup for the St. Louis Blues.
Huge for St. Louis down the stretch here.
And they absolutely destroyed Edmonton last night, 7-2. I think I saw the midway point, like Edmonton only had like 5 shots on goal midway through that game.
Do you think the Edmonton Oilers are already tuning out Ken Hitchcock? Like, what's going on with this team there? Like, the Oilers are just in disarray.
Yeah, it's just lack of depth. The goaltending. I think one thing I saw is that Mikko Koskinen, players keep picking him glove side, and he's only in a lot of goals glove side, which doesn't help when he can't catch the puck. But just a lack of depth, because like it's sort of crazy that you're gonna have Connor McDavid, who has over 100 points, and Draisaitl, who's most likely going to get to 100 points this year. And they won't make the playoffs. Like, how do you have 200-point guys on your team and not make the playoffs? It shows the disaster there. And then also we had David Perron, also from St. Louis. He returned to the lineup after missing a ton of time due to concussion symptoms. And he actually is on a 16-game point streak right now, which with injuries in between, which is actually very impressive there. And then James Neal returned to practice for the Calgary Flames, and he could be in the lineup Thursday night for them. So keep an eye on that. And guys out, Joel Pavelski's out with a lower body injury. They said it's longer than day-to-day, so I'm going to go with a week that he could be out there, which is a bit of a big loss to the Sharks are trying to catch the Calgary Flames for that first place in the Pacific Division, and trying to avoid the Vegas Golden Knights, who have only lost one game since acquiring Mark Stone at the trade deadline. And then going into some milestones, we had Steven Stamkos. He passed Vinny Lecavalier for most goals in franchise history with his 384th of his career. Elias Pettersson set the Canuck rookie record for most points in a season, picking up his 61st point of the season. Actually, he had a pretty nice dangle going up the ice before feeding Brock Besser, and then Granlund scoring the goal, which got him the point.
It'd be interesting to see if his career mirrors that of Pavel, the Russian Rocket.
Man, he's so fun to watch, especially that game. I really thought Alex Edler was in a ruin that night.
I am really worried about him though, because if the Canucks do make the playoffs, whether it's this year or in a few years, I mean, all it takes is one hit. You know, the playoffs are going to be a different season than the regular season. You know, and it's all I can see somebody taking a run at him, and he'll be done. Like, they'll break him in half. He's so small, right?
Yeah. Well, he's so elusive with the puck and everything, and hopefully by that time the Canucks will have added a few more pieces around him. So as long as the Canucks drafting thing goes well over the past few years, I've actually been currently reading a couple of things on the Athletic about the Canucks in the draft and their power play that we'll bring up on Friday's show on Canuck Talk. And just to finish off with a couple other things, Jimmy Howard with the Detroit Red Wings got a 1-year extension worth $4 million, but he can also make up to $5.1 million. If the Red Wings somehow miraculously make the playoffs next year, he can make a $1.1 million bonus if the Red Wings make the playoffs. But he's actually had a pretty good year in Detroit this year, even though his numbers, like he has a .908 save percentage, and a .305 goals against average, but that's gone up. But like after once they've unloaded like all their trade deadline guys and with injuries and stuff, I thought he's had actually a pretty solid year.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had it's Bobby Orr's 71st birthday, so we want to wish number 4 Bobby Orr a great birthday there. And speaking of birthdays, Zdeno Chara on his 42nd birthday, he dropped the gloves with Matt Martin, who thought it was a good idea to fight the 6'9" giant, and he becomes only the sixth other player 42 years or older in the NHL to get into an NHL fight. The other guys are Tim Horton, who's the oldest, who did it at just over 44 years old, Claude Lemieux, Alan Stanley, who played in the late 60s, he did it. Mark Recchi was the last guy to do it in 2010 with Boston, and Gary Roberts was the other one with Tampa Bay in 2009. And one last thing. So one quick shout out to Nicholas Backstrom, who was brought up on the most underrated players in the NHL in that poll. Yeah, he notched his 6th straight 50 assist season. It's his 9th of his career, which is tied for second for most by a European-born player. Jari Kurri has that mark with 10, and he also passed Henrik Sedin for most 50 assist seasons by a Swedish-born player as well, getting the 50 assist season.
Well, if you weren't so young, you probably remember a lot of Bobby Orr and his you would probably be super impressed with the way this guy played. Mm-hmm. But let's quickly talk about playoffs. Are you getting excited yet?
Oh, man, it's crazy to watch. Like, especially, man, it's like the East. Like Montreal got a huge win over Philadelphia last night because Philadelphia was creeping up on them with the win. They are 5 points up on Philadelphia, and they're only a point back at Columbus now for that final playoff spot. And then in the West, that big win by Colorado over Minnesota puts them two points back at Arizona for that wild final playoff spot. And they're only 1 point back in Minnesota now with a game in hand as well. And then you never know what with Chicago. It's pretty interesting to see what exactly they're going to do. Corey Crawford has been playing pretty well for them since coming back from injury. And then like Patrick Kane over 100 points now. And then Alex DeBrincat, Jonathan Toews. Like DeBrincat's going to get to 40 goals this season, which is crazy. Just his second year in the league. And Dylan Strome, just another guy. They're quite an exciting team. So as long as Arizona doesn't make the playoffs, because like I would rather see Colorado or Chicago again that final wild card spot. Just personally trying. They're a lot funner to watch than like Minnesota or Arizona.
Vancouver Giants, Bowen Byram named to the first team All-Star today in the Western Hockey League, as well as the Giants coach, and for some reason his name escapes me. Maybe we can post that later on, but they're both named to the first team All-Star. Vancouver, of course, number 1 seed in the West, starts their playoffs here in Langley against the Seattle Thunderbirds on Friday night and Saturday night. So some junior hockey action for those in the Lower Mainland that are looking forward to it. I'm Aaron. He's Matt. Remember to like and subscribe on our Facebook page for all the hockey highlights and, of course, the highlights of this show. And if you want just the show, remember to subscribe to us on YouTube to catch every episode of B&B Hockey Talk. We'll be back on Friday for the next episode of our special edition Fridays, where it's B&B Canucks Hockey Talk, where we talk all things Vancouver Canucks. So Thanks for joining us, and you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you on Friday.